Hey, Reading Lens listener, Jason Banzoff here, producer for the Group Talk network of podcasts. I want to talk to you about a few things before we kick off this episode. We're going to be ending 2022 with some great Reading Lens episodes. And then in 2023, we got a treat for you. Reading Lens will become the Group Takeaways with Nick Lindsay. Nick has some great things lined up, so make sure you keep an eye out for the great things coming out in 2023. We can't wait to put these out. So until then, enjoy this Reading Lens classic. Welcome to Group Talk. 4 shows, 1 podcast from the Small Group Network focusing on topics relevant to small group ministries. Whether you're in a church of 100 or 10,000, whether you're a volunteer or staff, we want to support, encourage, and equip you to lead well. So relax, listen, and enjoy Reading Lens with Nick Lindsay.
Hey, Small Group Network, welcome back to another episode of Reading Lens. We're so glad you chose the time to hang out with us. Here's how Reading Lens works. Each month, I have with us a guest who is also a small group's point person to share with you insights from books we are reading and what our takeaways were and how we plan to incorporate them into our lives, leadership, and our small groups. Today, as always, I have with us a special guest and one of my personal favorites because she's here on staff with me at Hoboken Grace, but this is the lovely Sarah Neral.
Hey, everybody.
Sarah, why don't you tell us about yourself?
I am the wife to CJ, mom to Lela Rose. She's 2.5. I am originally, you'll probably notice, I do not sound like I'm from New Jersey because I'm not. Well, I didn't grow up in New Jersey. I should say that. New Jersey is now home.
Exactly.
Yeah. So 10 years ago this year, moved from North Carolina to work in finance and to be in trust and wealth management. And 4.5 years into that journey, God kind of changed my plans and brought me on staff at Hoboken Grace. And so for the last 6 years, I've been on staff here at Hoboken Grace, wearing different hats. And the most recent one is being the associate director with you for groups.
Man, I was going to say the other thing, like you acknowledged your accent, which like obviously we here on staff give you a hard time. But you know what's interesting is I don't think I've ever really learned the Jersey accent. The only accent I can do is more Brooklyn than it's Jersey.
I can't do any of it.
Yeah, you can't do any.
It just...
Yeah. So for me, mine's the like, hey, we're doing groups over here. Like, or just, just basic, like,
I feel like it's a little bit of both.
Tough guy. But I worked with more Brooklyn people at JP Morgan. But that's the other thing that Sarah and I have in common. It's interesting you moved to New York, especially Hoboken. 60% of the people who live here in Hoboken work in the financial district, and you learn a lot about banking. So, coming into this, I was almost going to say, like, Sarah was also in investment banking, but she wasn't. She was in wealth management, which is completely different from what I was doing.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's so funny that like banking gets that detailed. But you know what? So do churches. So
it's true. You can say you're in finance, and I'm like, but what part of finance? There are so many parts.
Yeah. What attracted you to want to work for a church?
To be really honest, my heart was in the nonprofit space. So coming out of the corporate world, my last role at U.S. Trust was to work in philanthropy solutions. And so my heart was really working with charities and nonprofits in their grants, their grant writing, and specifically how trusts, wills, and estate management fed through that. And so I worked with a lot of nonprofits and how they were funded and how we and the offerings of the bank could help them, achieve the dreams and the things that they had and help them run. And so I really remember the year that I took that role at the bank was the year I got married. And I knew that my husband had just taken a new job when we got married. And I knew that we both couldn't have a new job in year one because that's just too much newness. And so I was like, okay, God, I feel like corporate America might not really be where I go long term, but I would really love to work in the nonprofit space. But I'm just going to put that out there and let you figure it out because I know now is not the time. So he moved me to the Philanthropic group and I spent 1.5 years there. And then honestly, just community is what, like the love of community, the love of volunteerism, the love of people. Because my favorite part of what I did at the bank was all client management, family foundations, and really working with people to achieve their dreams and help them be good stewards of what they have been given. And I feel like I still kind of get to do that now. It just has a different effect.
Yeah, which is awesome. So let me ask you this question. You talked about community and its influence on this. So I'm curious, I've shared before on my own opinion of what makes Hoboken unique in our context. One of the things I love to do on this podcast is get my guests to explain their context so they can understand how that influences what we have learned and what we've read and how that kind of applies. So,
Sure.
what, in your own words, what makes Hoboken unique?
Well, the reason I moved to this area was because there was no way I was going to live in Manhattan. So to me, Hoboken was the small town of Manhattan choices.
What makes it a small town?
It makes it a small town because to me, there was hustle and bustle, but the level of hustle and bustle is not quite Manhattan standards, right?
Yeah.
But also, I knew that I was completely new to an area and life that was foreign to me, and I needed to go off of somebody's instructions. And I met a friend of mine who was really good friends with me in college, met their lovely Italian grandparents, and they were like, if you're coming up here to work at the bank, you have to move to Hoboken.
Wow.
And they set it up to me, and they are still alive to this day. They're like in their 90s, and they were the ones who originally in a small restaurant in Dunn, believe it or not, because they were visiting their grandson. They told me it is an up and coming place for young professionals just like you. And they were like, you're going to love it. And it has a great community atmosphere. And they were like, and because you're not used to city life, it could probably help you navigate whether you want to stay here or not.
Wow. That is incredible. We've worked 10 years. I've never heard that before. Yeah. And I would just say, if you're listening in, usually I take places to stop and acknowledge certain things. Hey, take your coworkers out to lunch, ask them that question. Hey, what makes the city you live in unique? I did not expect that answer or have heard that story before. Yeah. And now every single coworker, I think that's going to be the question that says like, hey, what makes Hoboken unique to you?
And you know what the cool part is of this story?
Yeah.
Their grandson ended up moving to Hoboken, and him and his wife now own a store here in Hoboken, and they have a son that's just a little younger than my daughter. And so now they are a thriving part of this community that we actually joined together 10 years ago. And his wife lived with me for 6 months. And then she went back to Campbell University where I went to school, finished her schooling, came up here, and they've settled here. So it's a pretty cool, like I get the warm fuzzies thinking about it, but it's a pretty cool way that started for me. And it was just a glimpse of city life and what could be for me when I moved here. And 10 years later, it's home.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Okay. So we're going to start diving into today's episode.
Let's do it.
Today is unique in that we don't have a book for you.
Nope.
It's Reading Lens. So strike up another episode where Nick Lindsay's a fraud. But this is what happened. Sarah, she will not say this, so I'm going to say this on her behalf. Sarah is phenomenal at hospitality, making people feel welcome. And it's something that all of us in small groups really need to learn of how do we treat our guests that come in. And Sarah's had some experience with first impressions, or guest services, or whatever you call it at your church. Those people who kind of help welcome you into a church. And then she has brought a lot of those things into our small groups, which has been super beneficial to our group's life. And I always had this episode in my pocket because of working with Sarah. And I kept, Sarah and I would go to lunch and we'd talk about like, hey, when are we going to get you on the podcast? And I said, we've got to find that hospitality book that stands out to us. And I got to be honest, Sarah really needs to write this book because this book does not exist that I know of. I would love for you guys to tell me what that book is that I may have missed, but we tried a few different books. I was really hoping for this one book. I'm not even going to say it just so that I don't like to say negative things about other books and stuff like that. But I was really hoping it was going to be this one book, and we were just trying to force it. And so we're going to be honest with you. We decided we wanted to give you this content more than we wanted to try to find a book to force this into that kind of aligns with the truth that we've kind of experienced here when it comes to hospitality.
Yeah. And not to say that there's not good guest services or guest books and hospitality books out there, because I surely believe, I could give you some that are my
go ahead. Give me, I was going to
say. I would say Be Our Guest from the Disney is probably one of my top ones. And I think it actually closely relates not only to guest services on a Sunday morning perspective, but it actually does. And a lot of that is what got my gears turning for what we're going to talk about today. I do think the Set Your Table book from
Danny Myers.
Yep, there we go. That book is actually really good.
Another one we're going to touch on that we did a previous episode on is Art of the Gathering.
Yes.
Is another phenomenal book.
Phenomenal book.
I would say Priya Parker understands hospitality better than anyone.
Yeah, she does.
And her blog, oh my gosh, is that really good too? She started to do more. She does a newsletter or something. Something comes to my email from her.
Okay.
And it's phenomenal. So I would just say go to priyaparker.com. After you've visited smallgroupnetwork.com and checked out our resources. Hey, so one other thing that's really unique about today's episode is that we are really recording this for you to be able to pass on to your group leaders. So we are doing this with them in mind. And so, hey, if your group director or your group pastor sent this to you, hi, and we're glad that you're here. And this is recorded specifically for you because we think that being hospitable inside of your group is going to really benefit not just you, but really your group and help people feel welcome and loved by not only you, but by him.
So true.
Okay, so when did you notice that you kind of had this gift in hospitality?
I think I realized there was a point probably after I moved here where I realized the through line of my experiences growing up and from my parents and my grandparents and the people that were in our community. What I learned and what I had accumulated was starting to like bubble out at ferocious pace, or more ferocious pace than it did before in my life. And I think I realized it brought me immense joy. And at that point, it was like, okay, this kind of joy or like deep satisfaction is not just joy and deep satisfaction. It's actually me experiencing God the way God created me.
And this isn't a ploy of you trying to convince Yankees how to be hospitable.
No.
Okay. Just making sure.
Not directly, anyway. Just kidding.
All right, so let's give you guys some helpful tips on how to be hospitable in groups. What is it? Would you say is like our goals of our groups? Why are we trying to be hospitable?
Because we want to create an environment where people have an opportunity to pursue healthy relationships and spiritual growth, right? So it's really about creating the environment.
Yeah, and so then how do we actually create that environment?
So I think we have to think about something first. So creating environments, we're thinking of. You can think about the group itself, but I really think it starts before you even enter an environment.
So before they even get to their group.
Yeah, we need to start exercising hospitality before they enter into group itself. We need to think about what they're bringing into group, maybe some of the feelings and things they have coming into it.
What is it that you think the person on the other side is experiencing?
A lot of things, right? If we sit and talk about it, the fear, they have no idea what they're about to experience because they don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
They're probably bringing in a lot of expectation. Years ago in dinner groups, we had someone come and say that they studied the Bible for 3 hours because they studied the sermon and the scriptures from Sunday's conversation for 3 hours because they thought the expectation was to be that educated and well informed before they walk into group. So they're coming with an expectation that might not actually be true. And they may have expectations of what they've experienced from possible groups in the past, which may have been not positive experience.
Yeah. So they don't know necessarily how they should be able to participate inside of this group.
Exactly.
Or what the social norms are.
Exactly. And if the group has already been formed, you have outsider issues, right? That you're coming as a new person into a group that's already existed, at least that you know of.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're coming in and you're going to be the new person. And then there's that idea of I've got to be vulnerable, right? Vulnerable to show up, vulnerable to share and open your mouth, vulnerable to let new people inside of your life, vulnerable to actually start sharing your spiritual journey with some folks. For some people, that is deeply, deeply personal and a wall that they might not have let down yet.
Why do you think they still choose to show up?
Because they want to belong.
They want a place to belong.
They want a place to belong. They know that, if they've heard us say from the stage or from our social media or from if they've been personally invited, they know that there might be something that helps them. There might be they might recognize a hole or something that's lacking in their life. So they may be drawn because of what's lacking. And so I think there's that idea of wanting to be a part and belonging to something and having something meaningful.
Yeah, that's really great. And what I would encourage you guys too to be thinking about is like, what was that first group experience like for you? And what were some of the things that you were experiencing?
But I think if you don't mind me adding,
Yeah.
I think one of the things to remember and is encouraging to you if you're a new group leader and this starts to sound overwhelming that you're responsible for all these feelings and the heaviness that somebody's bringing into group, but you're not going to be able to answer all of the things that they're bringing in and what they might be feeling.
Heck no.
There's no way, right?
Yeah.
But the more that we can determine what those things are, and the more we can be aware, and the more we put ourselves back in that place of being new, whether it's the first time you walked into group, the first time you went on a first date, the first time that you walked into church ever, the first time you showed up for your first day of college classes. I mean, you met your roommate. There are things that we can draw back to of our own experiences that will help us determine, what they might be experiencing, break it down, and it provides a higher chance of somebody sticking.
Yeah. So what are some basics of hospitality that we need to acknowledge first?
I think we have to understand an important truth, and that is hospitality is more than just entertainment. You alluded to it earlier.
Would you even say that it's the majority?
Explain.
Do you think that entertainment's the majority?
That's what people think it is?
No, I'm thinking like when you think about hospitality, do you think it's more entertainment, or is it actually no, it's more how you care for them?
No, it's totally about how you're caring for the person. I think the entertainment factor is quite small.
Yeah, right. But I would say like perception though is that, oh, I need to put up this front, and this is like
right. Oh, definitely. And I think that's what intimidates people from wanting to be or thinking about hospitality. But I think what the truth here is something really important, and I think that's really why we're talking about it today, is because it's biblical. It's not just about all the things that come along with it or this idea of entertainment. I took some time to study it. I'm not really, I don't want to say that like I'm a biblical scholar or anything, but
don't underestimate
when I look at scripture, mainly the New Testament, I love what it says in Romans 12, and I'm going to read it just because I think the wording here is so interesting. It says, "Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor, never flag in zeal, be aglow with the Spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer." And here's the last line: "Contribute to the needs of the saints, practice hospitality." So in verse 13, it's literally telling us to pursue hospitality. It implies continuous action. It is a verb that is implying continuous action. So the command here is that hospitality is not just a one-time thing, but it's a constant attitude and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I don't think that is just entertainment, right?
No. Yeah.
It's not just entertainment. Then you look at 1 Peter, and it's telling us, above all, hold unfailing your love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. And again, the last line, practice hospitality ungrudgingly to one another. And the NIV says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So, in other words, what I am drawing from this and what I'm hearing it tell me is that, in other words, let your hospitality be an extension or an overflow of God's hospitality to you, and that you're being a good steward of God's grace.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I also I'm shocked no one's ever used. I love the way that the verse that you picked out, practice hospitality ungrudgingly. And
Right?
so I'm really thankful that no one's ever said like, Nick, like you can do this ungrudgingly. Like, let's encourage you here, buddy.
Nobody's called you out.
So I love that part. What about any other examples that you see in the New Testament where you see this specifically?
Definitely. I mean, an easy one would be Mary and Martha, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of them preparing for Jesus' arrival, and then all that Martha goes into. But then also in that same scenario, the way that Mary is caring for Jesus in that and lavishing her love on him. One of my favorite things to think about is, when you kind of, our pastor always tells us to put ourselves in the story. Think about this. The disciples and Jesus were traveling by foot everywhere they went, right?
Yeah.
And it's always telling us throughout the New Testament multiple times, like more times than I can sit here and just reference a couple of times. they traveled from house to house. They stayed with people. And so as Jesus and the disciples were traveling, people were opening their homes, feeding them. There was so many instances of hospitality being shown to them. And then, of course, we look at Jesus and the disciples, the way he washed their feet, the way he treated them, the way he talked to them, the way he brought them in, the way he dined with them. Even I'm even thinking about it now, thinking about the way the thousands gathered, and the way they fed them and cared for them because they were under their care, and listening to him speak. And so I go through all of that. And of course, it's the greatest example is what Jesus did for us, right? So out of the overflow of what he has done for us, we can then share it with other people.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, even hearing you talk about that, I want to stop to acknowledge too, like for you, the listener, that, we shared earlier, like, oh, well, think about how the person that's coming feels, right? Mm-hmm. Look at Jesus' example of like, he's practicing hospitality or being hospitable to strangers. And like, that's what we're asking of you guys, that like, hey, we're asking that you guys practice hospitality to people that you don't know, and you're going to welcome them into your home and
into your life.
Yeah.
It's just not your physical dwelling. You're inviting them into your life.
And so I think that we should just like acknowledge that too. Like, yeah, this is going to be hard. But totally. I think that God has really phenomenal things in this. And I think if you're someone who's been leading more than a month, I think you understand the joys that can come from these strangers.
Well, extremely. And what I love is that to call it a practice, that means there has to be a posture, right?
Yeah.
So the posture is of our heart. What is the posture of my heart? Because when you're thinking about it, I'm going to speak of it in my own personal life, 2-year-old running around an hour before group, getting everybody food, thinking about, what in the world, I've got toys and baby dolls and Paw Patrol cars everywhere. And, and food all over my counter. But then I have to like call myself back to, no, like this is an honor. What is the posture of my heart is not necessarily the shape of my home, but really what is the posture of my heart in which I am bringing these people in. Because the Bible asks me to do it ungrudgingly and without grumbling.
Yeah, and comes back to this constant attitude and practice that we are participating in.
Yeah, and if we're doing that, then can you imagine if that's the foundation we're creating? We are starting out before they even get there with our hearts being in the right place. And I fully believe if that's where we're starting, then we're off to a really good start.
Yeah. Why is it easy to neglect this idea?
Because people think it's hard. And we can really get tricked up in thinking that it's about the physical thing. But it is easy to overlook that practice or that posture. But if we have people coming in with the heavy things, if we have people coming in, to our homes where they're scared and worried and being vulnerable and things like that, then we have to remember a couple of truths. And one of them is that people remember how you make them feel, right?
Totally.
And there's that line where it says, people don't care how much you know, they until they know how much you care, right? And so I think something about that line is very interesting, and it's something that we should kind of keep in mind. This is kind of like a little, neurological nugget for us to know, is that when we see things and when we feel them, we feel things faster than we optically process them.
Yes.
So we're feeling first. We don't even realize it's happening. Now understanding that it's coming from the right side of our brain.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we have another episode called "The Other Half of the Church," and Sarah and I we just also had that same moment when it hit the left side of our brain. Now that we've learned this, that we've recently read a book. There's a podcast on this 2 episodes ago called "The Other Half of the Church," but pretty much it defends the science of what she just shared, and we're laughing because we wrote this before we read that book, and so it's coming back
honestly,
in our face.
In reading that book, I was like, "This is true. This is so true."
Yeah.
And the thing is, this is how important our feelings are, and it's how feelings are important to hospitality, because people are coming in with a lot of heavy things.
Yes,
they're craving something relational, which means it can't be transactional. Which again means hospitality is not transactional. It's not entertainment. It's not making just somebody happy. It's not just making things look pretty and smell good. It's actually setting up an environment where they can feel first and then optically process and then go to their brain space and let that other side start working. Because that's how God made us, right? I think about, a couple of examples of this would be, do you remember the conversation or the message you first heard when you walked into your first group?
Absolutely not.
But I bet you can remember your first night at group.
Oh, totally.
And what were some of the feelings that you remember from that night?
Well, I remember that night. This is a funny thing. I always love telling this story because I was 23 at the time. And I remember going to small group for the first time. I was invited by my friend Jeff, who I was on setup team with, and he invited me to be a part of this group. And I got there, and it's a bunch of older guys. You know how old these guys were?
30.
27. And I was just like, oh, these guys are so much older than me. And it just felt like they had their life together. But the thing that really stood out to me that was so impactful in my life was how they talked about and treated their spouse and or significant other. And it was so countercultural to everything else that I was experiencing. And I remember like how that made me feel, like we just talked about.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what food we had there that night, right? So it's just another one of those things, like, I don't remember that things, but I could tell you 6 of the guys that were at that group, and I think there were 8 or 9.
I could also probably tell you the same. One of them being that your lovely wife was in my first group. And I remember what I hold from that night is not even being the new person in group. What I hold from that night is how it felt breaking off into pairs of 2 and praying for the other person, and how pivotal that group of women were to me thriving in Hoboken, because they made me feel like, one, yes, you just made a huge step in your life. Yes, it was scary, but you're going to be okay. And I needed that. I needed to know that I just did not make the scariest decision of my entire life and I'm going to fail.
Okay, so we've gotten into hospitality. I think we've clearly covered the why, right? So let's get into the practical stuff. And I think a good place to start with this that we've kind of identified is, let's think about tangible versus non-tangible hospitality. So I think that we should definitely start with the tangible things. And so when it comes to groups, the thing that's really important when things get started is one of the first interactions that you're generally going to have with people. And we're going to make a few assumptions here. So one, we assumed the strangers aspect of this.
Yes.
And I think this might also be, maybe it might be particular to our culture. We have a very transient community. So we have people coming in all the time. And so our signups are always open for people to join. And so for us, we have a lot of online signups, people who are interested in joining the group and things like that. So it's going to take an initial response. So for you, this initial response may be when you meet them on a Sunday morning and you're inviting someone to the group and they're like, well, why don't you tell me more about your group, like kind of thing. Or for our example that we're going to use here, I think some of the principles transfer over, is the email that you're going to originally send to them. And so the first kind of tip that we give with this is that we want you to provide a clear expectation of what they're going to experience. And so
and this is pride.
Yeah, which is like, hey, and so I have a few things here, like time, address, buzzer, kind of cell phone number, and then like what to bring. And so we, at our culture, we call our small groups dinner groups. And so there's this expectation of like, hey, are you guys going to eat? Do I need to bring anything? Do I bring stuff? But it goes back to the like, hey, what are they experiencing before they come? And so for us, like the other thing I think that's unique about Hoboken is that the culture, like it's not often that you get invited into somebody else's home. It's a really big deal in New York City if you get invited to somebody else's home.
Yes.
And both parties know that. So it's like providing them like, hey, when you get here, look for this. And like, what's funny is other places, this was obviously pre Google Maps and things like that, when you used to have to give like physical references of like, you're going to get
the third house down on the right, or
when you go past the purple house, make a right.
Yeah.
So that is still a reality here in our apartments because our apartments are so complex. It's like, you're going to take the elevator up to the third floor and then you're going to make a right kind of thing. And
it's past the one with the funny welcome.
Yeah. So all these things that we're trying to share with you is that like, we want to take out the guesswork from that initial expectation. And so they want to know like, the other thing I do is release the expectation. Listen, you don't need to bring anything the first night. Like we'll cover that for you.
I just want
like,
you to come.
yeah.
That's usually just what I say. We want it lower the barrier for them to come.
Yep. And I realize what I just said sounds like, man, that's a lot of details you're putting in this. And that's a big mistake that a lot of group leaders make in their initial email is like, I don't think this is the time for you to share your life story. So like, it doesn't need to be this like huge thing of like, here's kind of the expectations of what needs to come with this.
No, because remember that if you are someone walking in to the first time and you get this email from someone and they unload their like testimony on you, you're like, yeah, that might be too heavy for me to join. I'm not gonna take part. So let's just get them there, give them what they need to know to get there and that they are welcome. And then I learned this from you. And I think one of the other practical tips about an invite email is we don't want to use the word hope.
Yeah.
Right?
Throw out the word hope. We all say, well, we hope to see you.
No.
Throw it out of here.
Throw out the hope. Say, I will see you. Go ahead and set the one expectation you can set is that you're going to see them. So I'll see you next week,
Yeah.
Because.
And let me explain the why on this. This is super important. So the reason why I say throw out the hope and say, I'm going to see you there is because you're setting the expectation that they are going to be there. When you say hope, it's not confident whether they're going to be there or not. So there's no expectation for them to tell you they're not going to come.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to promise you that just because you wrote, I'll see you there on Monday, that they're not going to not email you.
And not show up.
You'll have a much stronger percentage of people telling you like, hey, it's now Monday. I couldn't, my dog threw up. I can't make it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
The other thing I've learned recently since we've last written this that I have done, I don't think I've actually shared this with you, Sarah, is I also, if your database or how they sign up, if they ever give you the number, I just start texting them and I say, hey, I just sent you an email because I want them to go look at it. And I say, here's my phone number in case you need to get a hold of me. And I'm going to give you in our show notes the example that I use for my own group because you'll see the reference in it that like I'll give them my phone number as well. I'm sorry guys, I'm not going to give you my phone number. Well, the phone number in it will be Steve's instead. No, I'm just joking. But that's just, I think, a modern thing. Because here's the thing I realized. So we have people who sign up online, but where is it likely that you sign up for things? Using your phone, right?
Usually on your phone.
And so sometimes people who use their phone, like they don't really, even though the email lives on the phone, they don't actually go look at it. So I don't think sometimes they might not know the expectation is that they're going to receive an email from the individual. And so like, that's my kind of safeguard that like, hey, here's my number. You can ask me questions ahead of time. If this is, and it kind of lets them know like, hey, what's your preferred communication style?
Yeah.
Whether they're going to respond in email or they're going to respond in text message or.
I am just thinking about this through, like, as you're saying this, like what that would be as an experience, because 9 times out of 10, when you're going somewhere, I would much rather the information of where I'm going be in a text than in an email because it's so frustrating to me. I don't know why, but it's so much more frustrating to me to pull up an email to find the address than it is to be like, oh, so-and-so texted me. Let me find that.
Plus these phones today that when you put in the address and you press it, like Google Maps just pops up or Apple Maps.
Right?
Like,
we just need to make it simple. So whatever we can do to lower the barrier of them coming in. And to this point of an invite email or even a text message, pre-make it. As Nick said, he already has his example because
oh my gosh,
we have encouraged our leaders, automate this process, you guys. Go ahead and save
this in your notes app.
Save it in your notes app. Save it in your email as a template. And that ensures another thing, which I think is later on in our encouragement list down here when we're talking about tangible things. But that ensures that you're giving them a quicker response. Because nobody is going to feel loved if you've waited after 24 hours to welcome them to your group. They're going to think there's no space for them, and maybe the sign-up process didn't work, or that they're unwanted.
Yeah. That's in everyone's mind that we didn't talk about is whether they're wanted or not.
Right.
And now let's pretend you've sent this email out, right? And they haven't responded, or you may feel like you're getting ghosted. And I think this brings up the second kind of thing that we would really encourage you to you can tangibly do. And it's to try to meet with them face to face.
Yeah.
So when possible, especially if you have, let's say that there's a Sunday coming up and let's say you're a Monday group, you receive on Wednesday an email that says, hey, so-and-so is interested in your group, right? One of the things I'll include in my email on that one is that I'll say, hey, I'm going to be at this service on Sunday.
Yeah.
I would love to meet you, or just to even say hello and introduce myself. That's one of the things that'll really reduce someone's fear as they're coming to church, as they're coming to your home, is that like, I at least know one person who's going to be there.
Yeah. And how even great if they can meet you, that's fantastic. But even if you run into somebody else in your group and say, hey, somebody just is wanting to sign up and join our group, come over here and let me introduce you to them real quick. Highly doubt your other group member would say no. And how much of a connection point is that you're bringing not just one face, but two that they'll be able to walk in with and meet a group that next week.
Yep. And if you're feeling, you want to like maybe invite them to coffee or those kind of things.
Sure.
But I think one of the other things too that you can, I just realized too, like I think you'll see in my example email as well, is I let them know, like I'm going to give them more details as we get closer to Monday. So that's one of the other things that you can kind of build into your quick email, is like, hey, I just want to give a quick introduction and here's what we do in a sense, but like I'm going to give you more details as we get closer to that. So it reduces the what goes into that email as a sense. So with that, you want to talk about the next tangible way?
Yeah. And that's expect people to come. If you're not creating the expectation that people are going to come to your group members will not either. Something that I think is really important is that it's not just you as a leader being prepared for people to come, but we're sharing that expectation with the rest of the people that are in our group. At Hoboken Grace, we've worked really hard to think ahead and prepare for others. We expect people to show up. And we have noticed that having that attitude and that forethought allows people to sense and to feel, like we talked about earlier, that they were prepared for. And knowing and walking in, I mean, just think about it from a Sunday perspective, knowing that, people have ushers and greeters at the doors, that you're not walking in alone, that people were preparing for your arrival, right? And so you want the same thing to happen inside of your group. We
talk about this when we go to fast food restaurants together.
Yes.
When we go out to restaurants, and there's this growing culture of we're going to treat the drive-through before we treat the people standing in front of us.
I can't stand it. I can't, like, it literally.
And it's this principle of like, they didn't expect me to come.
Yes.
And so like, we're telling you this because maybe someone's coming to your dinner group or your small group and you're ignoring them to have a conversation with somebody else. Like you're not trying to help them, include them into conversations, help them feel welcomed, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Like, did you expect them to be there at all?
And that, look, we're talking about really practical things. So what does that look like? If you're saying, okay, Sarah, well then how do I share that vision with my group? It is tangible. Put out 1 to 2 extra chairs than you might need for your group. So case in point, this week when I hosted group in my home, someone said, oh, is somebody else coming? I was like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to leave this here anyway. And that has just become part of my normal routine, is that I want an extra chair so that if any new people do come in, or if somebody's running extremely late, I don't want them to think I didn't prepare for them either. So just having that extra chair, having a little more food than is required, just that little bit extra, just so that if somebody didn't eat dinner and they're, enjoying those extra cookies, let them enjoy it without feeling that they're, leaving everybody else out from enjoying those cookies. And it also helps our group members realize it's not about them all the time. And it's about the new people that come into our group too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really think that you can use that spare chair to your advantage as well.
Definitely.
I think that there's part of it that like communicates there's room for more. And I think the other thing that's kind of helpful in this scenario as well is that, okay, Nick and Sarah, you talked about expect people to come. Well, not as many people came as I wanted them to come.
Yeah.
Never neglect the people that actually showed up.
Right.
Like never get mad that like I'm supposed to have a group of 10 and 4 people showed up. Those 3 other people that are there, like you don't know how God wants to use them and or you that night in there. So I would really encourage you to like stop focusing on the numbers of people that are there.
And rarely ever does an intimate group disappoint.
Yeah.
Right?
right?
You get to know
Like,
people better.
man, guys, we have a really great opportunity tonight. It's just the four of us.
Right.
And so we're going to get to chat more and those kind of things that go with it. All right, what's next?
I think something we have to think about is, if we're talking about hospitality, then what is our space going to look like, right? When you're creating environment, let's talk about the actual space. And I learned a massive lesson about this my first year of leading group. I was living alone. And of course, being from the South, my Southern hospitality tendencies sometimes can go into like an unhealthy swing, and that I rushed home from work feeling that everything had to be spotless and everything needed to be clean. And I had to use all my nice dishes and dinner had to be piping hot. And I mean, you guys, I broke a sweat trying to prepare for my group. And I sit there, everything was beautifully laid out. Like, it was a miracle I made it in time before the first person walked in the door from all the work that I was huffing and puffing around my apartment doing. And there was nothing wrong with what I was doing, right? I wanted it to communicate to them that they were loved. They were welcome in my home, that, I prepared for them probably a little too much. And, but the thing that came after
So what you're saying is that your space didn't need to be Southern Living magazine?
It didn't. I mean, it could have been Magnolia Journal. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, do I need to use a more recent example? I'm sorry.
I
just
still think Southern
date
Living
myself
is
with Southern Living.
a wonderful, like, what do you call it?
Yeah. Okay, so does that mean we just leave it a complete mess?
No. What happened is that I did all this, and I'm a new group leader, right? And so the next time I asked someone to host a group, because I just started realizing that time after time and week after week, it was all at my apartment. And I was like, this is a bit much, And not that I did not enjoy it, but it was just like, I would really love for someone else to host. And I realized that because of someone in my group's response, when I asked my group if someone wanted to host, they were like, Sarah, I don't know. Like, you set the bar really high, and I don't think we can meet it. And that is exactly what that person told me. And I will never forget it, because at that moment I realized, Sarah, the queen was not coming to your apartment. They're not eating off the floor.
Yeah.
They understand that you just came home from work.
Yeah.
They don't need the pomp and circumstance.
Yeah.
They need a welcoming, warm environment. And I also need to communicate, you don't have to repeat what I just did for group to go well or for you to host group at your home.
Yeah.
Because what I was saying was the expectation is up here.
Yeah.
And the expectation is high. And that did not help when it comes to reproducing in my group, because it was just too much, right? It was just too much cleaning, and it was not enough enjoying. And yes, it was like a complete Martha moment.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the things that we could do to prepare the space? Let me start with the first one, because it's remove the distractions from your home.
Yep.
I think this is really good in practice, because you want to have a quality discussion and meaningful conversation. And so you're also probably in your group covenant or outline or whatever it is that your group kind of agrees on how you guys are going to get along. One of them is probably like the way in which you participate in conversation. And then one of it's probably like that, like, please don't have things that are distracting, but we don't consider the environment distracting when we talk about that. So I think that's one of those things that we
because of Zoom.
Oh yeah, that's interesting about like, hey, please mute if you're not participating.
I think we might now more because of Zoom, but now that we're going back in person, we still have some other things to consider.
Yeah. So the one that I want to talk about with distractions to really consider is pets. I really hope that we don't offend the dog people, but they don't make good group members. And I would caution you if you think that you have the dog that's the exception, right? Now, maybe your group's full of dog lovers, though. Maybe you're a dog lover group kind of thing. But like, I would at least like figure out like what are the boundaries with the dog. At least like if it's not okay for a human to do, I don't think it's okay for. If it's not okay for your group member to do, I don't think it's okay that we should tolerate from the dog. So like my example from this is I was in a group once, and the dog just came and laid in the middle of the group and then just went spread eagle. Like, because I think he wanted someone to like rub his belly. And the problem is that someone's over here like pouring out their heart, and here comes in this dog that like distracts us from being able to care for this person who's pouring out their heart. And it's just like, hey, is someone gonna pet that dog? Like, is someone gonna hand that person a Kleenex?
Right.
Like that's one of those things. So like consider that. I really think like maybe there's a time where they can be involved.
Yep.
And then maybe there's a space where that needs to be removed. And this would be I expect letters on this potentially. But I don't know if this will make it. But one of the things I want to say is like I've realized there's a lot of family groups and things like that, and so you guys are going to have different roles. And I love that your families get to be a part of group and that your children are a part of it. But if you're trying to reach young adults, sometimes the children can
be a distraction.
But sometimes there's children. Again, it's the same scenario where like, hey, we're really trying to. Someone's sharing. We're trying to have a conversation, and then constantly a kid is interrupting or something along those lines. So that's one of those things that's like it's going to be really challenging. I recognize childcare is extremely difficult, but if you can, like, it's one of those conversations I think you want to have with your group about like, hey, we want to have a distraction-free environment. So that means we're going to put away our phones. Maybe that's your kind of group that you kind of establish, or like, hey, when it gets time, like we're each going to rotate and someone's going to watch the kids so that it doesn't become a distraction to the group. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. I recognize that like that might be specific to our context, but I also like I already see your email coming of bring the children to me.
The other thing to take some pressure off of you, the other thing is, and this might be a freebie or an easy one, but I still think we forget that this still needs to be done. And is that if you're using some sort of audio visual, please test it. Right? You don't want that to be a distraction because if you're on a roll, you don't want your, technical problems that could have been remedied before group.
No, it happens all the time.
Or like a Wi-Fi issue or, just something that.
Knowing how to cast, those kind of things that are modern
those things
issues.
Are cleaned up because it's part of it.
Yep.
And something I think is important going back to the space that you're setting is I really think your seating is just as important. I think some really good rules of thumb is that it should be comfortable if possible. And really, when you can, set up in a circle because you want to be able to see each other's faces. You want to be able to have that communal aspect to it. And I really do feel like that helps someone feel a part of the group because it allows them literally to be a part of the group. And it's a very belonging atmosphere you're creating.
I think there's something also powerful about the table. If you can get around the table, I think that's super helpful. I realize some groups get up to like 12 and 13 and some groups we don't have this in Hoboken because we can't fit it more than like 12 people, but some get like to really big numbers. So that's one of those things that I would do. What's another fun way to prepare the space?
I'm going to throw this out there and I hope no one, for some circumstances, a lot of guys I know say, I don't think I can create a hospitable place because I'm not as good as, some of the females that I know. And can I just say that is totally not true? Can I tell you, gentlemen, that you can totally do this and that please don't put undue pressure on yourself. I would tell
Can
that to
I tell
anybody.
my secret?
Yes, please.
So when this will be interesting. I will grab on the way home from work. I'll get one of those $4 cookies from a corner store. Those like easy bake things you just throw in the oven and they ready and bakes. And they take 15 minutes, but they make your house smell amazing. Like who doesn't want to walk in and smell fresh baked cookies or popcorn or those kind of things? So things are the things that are kind of pleasant aromas are one of those things that can be really welcoming as you walk in.
You may not have any other things to offer, or if you're not a person who has, you might be a minimalist. That's great. But you know what? The smell of your place is actually something that is warm and inviting. So go to Target, find an awesome candle.
And it's one of those other side of the brain things.
Yeah,
right? You're
totally.
Gonna remember those kind of things.
Completely.
So.
I would suggest one, that wouldn't harm anybody's allergies.
Yeah. And I think there's one last really important one that you want to share about having your space prepared.
Be ready 15 minutes before your group starts.
Yeah.
Because you will always have one person show up early. There's one in every group. Mm-hmm. There may be more than one in every group. I've had seasons where there's been multiple.
We have a lot of people who come right after work.
We do.
And sometimes they just don't have time to go home in time. They show up early.
Or it would be like a complete walk across town. You don't want to make anybody feel that uncomfortable, but be ready 15 minutes early. And I think it also goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Not only will you have somebody show up early, But it helps you be prepared for the people that are coming. It's a great time to connect with people one-on-one as they're coming in. But I also think it's a great heart check, right? It is a great time to get the posture of your heart ready to welcome people and actively practice hospitality.
Yeah. So far intangibility, we've covered 4. So the invite email that we have meeting face to face, we have expecting people to come, we have prepared the space. What's the last one, the 5th one that you want us to know?
You're the host.
Yes.
The people who come into your group need to know who will be there, right? Like they need to know who they're expecting to see. You're the host. But you also want to be able to know who is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Look at your roster.
Is there someone you haven't seen there in a while that you need to send a text?
Is there some names that sometimes you just keep forgetting or you get wrong? It happens, right? Like,
oh my God, I've been calling her Kristen this whole time and she's Kirsten.
It can happen. It can totally happen. Or if you've only met somebody one time, it happens. The worst thing that you can do is be a relaxed and passive host. You never want anybody to do the welcoming for you. You want to be the one who is offering that. And I remember this, and it's one of my favorite things about Priya's book, The Art of the Gathering. And that is 3 things you can do to be a great host. 1 is connect your guests. Find opportunities to know each other. Your role is to make sure people know each other. And Nick has a phenomenal time saver tip. You shared this with me. You've shared this with other leaders. Explain that. Yeah,
so this actually happened this month. I got 3 weeks in a row where I had people sign up for my group for the first time. So when someone signs up new for the first time, I do a couple of things. The first thing I do is I give a heads up to the rest of our group because I want everyone to be joining in and making this person feel welcome. And one of the things that gets a little frustrating when you've hit the 3rd week in a row is like, you can't just go through and do like introductions for the 3rd time in a row. So I will go around and do it for them. So I'll go around the room and be like, hey, this is Brian. He's from Chicago and he works in sports marketing. And this is Todd. And Todd works at a catering company and he used to live in South Jersey. And like just going through and trying to give someone it up. But then also saying like, listen, you're going to meet these people and get to hear their stories, but like this gives you kind of like a brief introduction of who they are.
Yeah, that's just a great tip. And I'll also say this, a lot of the things we're talking about today could also overflow into your work environment. And I think that's one of them. It's a great networking tool. The second one is protect your guests. Not only are you connecting your guests to be a good host, you're also protecting your guests. You want to be careful of those that can steer your conversation. Sometimes we have the long talkers. Sometimes we have on and on talkers. We have those that are, sometimes that are just really discouraged in where they are in life. And we just want to be able to steer the conversation, right? And make sure that we're staying on topic, being good stewards of people's time, but just being able to protect your guests in how the experience of the evening and the flow of the evening is going. And the third thing is equalize your guests. You want to hear from everyone. This is something that I have really, when I first started leading, this was something that I was really, really careful of. And because I had a lot of friends who call themselves introverts, but yet when they talk, they drop these spiritual anvils that like sit on you for the entire week. So you want to engage those people, right? And you want to be able to pull out from them. And you don't want them to be hidden inside of your group. You want them to feel that they are a part of your group. And so how can you actively equalize your guests and that your group members all feel like they have a valuable voice around the table and that they have something to contribute? And when you give those people space, you encourage them and you support it and you celebrate it. And for me, you pick the anvil up and you sit with it for a while.
Yeah, the other thing I would say there to caution you with, though, is just be careful if someone's brand new and they've been quiet the whole time, and you want to be careful how you challenge them. Like,
oh yeah.
So like, I think I would originally, like in the old days, come at it and be like, hey, so how are you taking this all in? Right. And it's just like, I would now say like, hey, if you're comfortable, like, I'm just curious, how does this hit you?
Right.
Or like those kind of things, like what's standing out to you or what?
And something I've noticed recently in a lot of new people in group, it's a body language check, right? If they're nodding their head or they're like agreeing, like that's an open sign of like, hey, you were just shaking your head in agreement. What is your thought on that? So just making it friendly and an
You go to eat.
equalizing conversation. And then the last thing when you are the host is you want to follow up and encourage. Just as I said,
Yes.
there were friends and members of my group that would drop an anvil and of that awesome truth.
Yes.
And you literally, sometimes in the moment, I say, thank you for sharing that. Like, because I have no follow up. I have no, like, I don't even want to add anything to what they just said because it was beautiful and they said it and it was from them and it was from their heart. And so I really try to say thank you for sharing, making that a part of and really meaning it.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because you listen. You were like an active listener in that situation.
Yeah.
But engaging personally when you're following up and encouraging people, whether that be in person, saying thank you for sharing, in a text, hey, what you shared tonight at group was really awesome. Or maybe even the next morning, what you said is still on my mind. Like, that was amazing.
That's a good line.
Or email. Like, the reason I say in person, text, and email, and yes, these are in order, is because an encouraging word to someone in person, it holds a different weight than it was in text. And text to me, and I think to others, also has a weightier importance than an email. And so it just offers that welcoming, belonging, again, all the things that we're trying to drill in today, engaging personally.
Here's the time that you really need to do this. If you invited someone to come to group that night, or you're like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, really great to have you jump back into group with us. Or maybe like it's just like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, like just really love for you to be in group with us. And they show up. Acknowledge that. You have to I don't know if you noticed, but you made a request that they kind of be there.
And they did.
So like, let them know they made a difference. Let them know that they are valued and they'll continue to be a part of it. Like, you want them to continue sharing the things that were really powerful that she talked about, the spiritual anvils. If it was actually true and it was a spiritual anvil and you like kind of acknowledge it, like she just said. So that's the thing that we're trying to get there.
Definitely.
So.
And to do that, you got to pay attention to what's said in group, be able to acknowledge it afterwards. You want to explain why in an honest way, why it was great to have them back in group, build out that why, appreciate, what you shared. It's still moving me. It's still in my mind. And don't lie. We can't be wrapped up in ourselves or the details.
You're done if you lie in
why
this one.
We can't even build a why. Like, it's just not necessary because it's not about you. And then the last thing, it's going to be simple, but sometimes we as leaders forget, add them to your roster.
We started talking about tangible ways, and now we're going to wrap up here towards the end with intangible ways. So how do we want to start, Sarah?
We want to start an intangible way is getting the group involved. People come into your group. If you've been dealing with them, whether you're the one who met them behind a connections desk or you're the one who texted them or emailed them, they're going to have that expectation that you are the person that's going to connect them, that you're the person that's going to remember. They're going to be looking out for Sarah, right? Or Nick.
Mm-hmm.
But an intangible hospitality win is when your group members connect with them. It blows their mind.
Yeah. So I think I shared about this in the last section, but that one of the things I have my group members do, I give them a heads up when someone new is going to be coming to group. And I even share with them, listen, they're going to expect me to be kind and welcoming to them. You're going to blow their mind when they come and everyone is trying to include them into it. And like, my guys have so bought into this. And I think some of this starts with like your group expectations that we talked about. And so we talk about distributing the roles all the time. And one of the things as a leader that I'm confident you're doing this, but like distributing roles. Have you ever considered giving the role away of someone's job to be the welcoming committee to this group or things like that? We have people who love to get coffee with others outside of the leader. It's one thing when the leader's like, hey, I'd love to grab coffee with you. Do you know what it's like when someone else in the group is like, man, you're really interesting what you had to share tonight. Do you think we could grab coffee over the weekend? Like,
that is solidifying what they're going there to do. That means we're firing at all cylinders and we're doing exactly what community is meant to be doing.
Yeah. And I'll be honest. I wonder sometimes if that's like a tip that's really going to help you with the young adults. I'm confident that'll help you with the young adults that are looking for someone to connect with. I don't know what that looks like as people becomes that, but I'm sure like I've seen it now that we've become parents. Like I'm always looking for other dads to get to talk to, and moms are looking for other moms to get to talk to. So I'm sure that just continues on, and people want to share their story. And I can't tell you how much it helps once you hear someone's story.
And this is the thing. If this is an outflow of your heart, it's going to be received as that. It's not going to be received as you being fake or just trying too hard. No. It's going to be received in the manner in which it was presented. And if that is truly our group's passion, if that is, if we're all acting in that way and we're all following that command that was given to us, that we're practicing this unbegrudgingly and without grumbling, then it is going to be a beautiful outpouring from our heart. And it's really going to mean something to the person who's on the receiving end of it.
Yeah. We've talked about initially about how we try to get everyone to encourage like being welcoming. One of the other things we want our group members to all own is something that we call invite and invest here. I recognize this term gets used a lot, but it's really that like we want others to be inviting their friends to be a part of this as well. Like obviously it would be the most ideal situation is they go and start their own group, right? You have you and two friends, like seriously, go start your own group, like help them get there. But for some people, they're just not there yet, right? And so like they want their friends to be a part of that. So like trying to get them to think about who that might be. Who will your group members invest in, but also like help them identify who are in their proximity. So I don't know what it is, but I'm always shocked when I ask my group members who they're investing and inviting in, and they give me the names of people who are far away. Like it's so interesting. I'll be like, so hey, yeah, like who are we? Like, well, I'm really interested in reaching my brother, and it's like, oh, where does your brother live? Like, oh, he lives in South Korea, and it's just like, hey, cool, that's 6,000 miles away. Like, how are the steps you're going to take to invest in him?
The level of investment is different when the proximity is closer.
Yeah. And I would say, like, help them see the people who are near them. So, like, who are the people at their job, in their building, at their kids' baseball practice, or at the hockey rink, or wherever you may be.
The thing about this, too, to say here is that there is a heart check moment. When it comes to this.
I know where you're going.
And I am saying this because I currently am living it out. And I'm just going to be vulnerable, right? That's what we do as groups people. It is really easy to be in ministry or to be in leadership and to be around your people constantly. But if your leaders or people in your group are having trouble naming people to even want to invest and invite in, then that means that our Christian bubble might be a tad too tight. And that we need to look at where are the places in my life that I might need to broaden my proximity or show up in or dive in a little deeper to. And for me, I mean, I thought of that for a moment there when we started fall. It was, okay, I have been so entrenched in some of this. That's not a bad thing, but my mind has not been present to where other places I can be present in, like at the park with my daughter and meeting these awesome nannies and moms and having play dates with people I don't know and being brave to do that and letting that circle be something that I can invest and invite in.
Yeah, I apologize if I'm Jesus juking you here, but do you bring that into your prayer life of like, do you like, man, God, like help me?
Yes, and you did. And that I don't mean that and like that you set me up for that. You totally did not know my answer was going to be yes, but it's totally true because my husband and I were really thinking, we were just thinking like, how can we do this? And because I didn't have an answer, I had to pray about it. I literally didn't have an answer. And I felt extremely like, I felt like there was a finger on me going, hey, there was a huge nudge there of like, this part of your life may need to change.
Yeah. And then I would say the other thing too is don't miss the opportunities that exist on Sunday.
It's such an easy one.
Yeah,
it's
right?
Such an easy one.
Your church has new people that come every single Sunday. And so we have a little acronym that'll help you out with this. It's FORM. So FORM. And the first one is from. And so I usually just start with, hey, do you live around here? And if you notice, I didn't say like, hey, do you live in the specific city that you're in? So for us, I didn't say, hey, do you live in Hoboken? Right? Because I've learned that if you say, do you live around here? They get to define what's around here. And then this is the other tip that I have. I think like 75% of the time I get, no, I don't really live around here. I live, and they'll tell me a place that's 6 blocks away. And I'll be like, you're from around here. And even if they say someplace it depends. I think I do have a limit. If they say a town that's like within 20 minutes, I'll usually say, oh yeah, that's around here, like kind of thing. It's a great thing. And then the other one with the from that goes with that is, how long have you been attending, right? So I think a great principle that you're going to see in these forms as well is assume that they're already doing. Don't walk into, hey, is this your first time? And when you're gonna, I'll be honest, you're gonna have to learn that mistake more than once. Of just like, I can't say that because they're gonna be like, I've been coming here for 3 years, and like that's the thing that's just like, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten that, but I've learned the hard way. Like, how long have you been attending?
Backtracking out of that one is a little difficult.
Yeah. The next one is occupation. So, hey, what do you do for a living? It gives you a chance to get to hear what they do and what they're interested in. R is recreation. Very similar. Like, what do you like to do for fun? Is a great one. That's a good reminder for myself. I think that's one. I usually just do foam, which is just FOM. And I think like I need to remember that one. Like, what is it that you enjoy? And then the last one is ministry, which can also be a group. And this is your opportunity to bring it home. And like I just shared earlier of the conversation of assume that they're already doing it. Instead of asking, hey, are you in a group? Ask them, which group are you a part of? And when they tell you, oh, I'm not in a group. Oh my gosh, Sarah, you've got to come join my group. We have room for you. We'd love to have you. And like, there's that personal invitation that they've been waiting for this whole time to come to group. And it's one of those things I just, man, like, again, so from, do you live around here? How long have you been attending? What do you do for a living? What do you like to do for fun? What group are you a part of? And I'll be honest, sometimes like, obviously you guys are smart people, right? And you can get to it as well. And it's like, do you live around here? How long have you been attending? Like, oh, this is my first time here. Oh, well, we have this thing called groups. We would really love for you to be a part of that. Like, come join me. Or like, man, I bet you haven't had a chance to go to this coffee shop yet, and it's phenomenal. So can I buy your first cup there? Like, just look for those opportunities to step in there. And that's one I had never thought of before, but that's a really good one of like, man, we've been getting this a lot because there's a lot of people moving in right now. And it's like, oh man, you haven't had a chance to go eat at Carlos Bakery. Like, hey, let me go buy you your first cupcake, or let me go buy you your first lobster roll or cannoli, right?
Cannoli for sure.
Kind of thing. and trying to like just find an opportunity to connect with them. So, and then do you want to tell us about the last one?
Yeah. So we've talked about coming in with this posture into this practice of hospitality and the posture of our heart. And overall, one of the things that we have to remember is that prayer is of utmost importance in this process. We can do the practical and tangible things, but we can't do this without prayer. We can't. And so we like to encourage our leaders in doing this, that we want to prepare our hearts for other people. And I also think it's something that you bring your group into. And the final thing is to pray before and after, before group and after. It is something we cannot do on our own. If we were to do groups ministry by ourselves, we would fail. If we were to welcome people on our own strength and our own muster, we're going to hurt someone's feelings at some point. What we would hope to be hospitable and kind sometimes is going to fall flat. But if we are doing it through the posture and practice of prayer and welcoming others and wanting to do what Jesus did, and it be an overflow of sharing what he did for us, we can't go wrong.
Wow, that is incredible. All right, Sarah, so we've reached the end, which means that we're in the lightning round. So what's another book, podcast, movie, anything that you've learned recently that's had an impact on your leadership?
So I feel like, as my friend, you would expect me to say all these Hallmark movies that I watch and enjoy. But I'm going to flip the script on you. I have thoroughly enjoyed this TV show called SEAL Team.
Okay.
I know you're not expecting
What's
this.
this on?
It's on CBS, but I think now it's on Paramount.
Oh, you're so old.
It's now on Paramount Plus.
That now makes you young again. It's
a streaming on Sundays. But one of the things that I love about this show, and it's something that I never knew was a part. When you watch military shows, I feel like you always learn something, because we're not always privy to that unless that's part of your life. And one thing I love about the show is that there's this role of this woman. Her storyline in the whole thing is how she is the one that preps and gets all the energy and gets all the ducks in a row before the SEAL team goes out on their mission.
Yeah.
But she's also the one that is like sending the drone out that watches them while they're going out on their mission.
Nice.
And I love this woman. I love that they're telling the story of how she collects her intel. She works with the CIA. Like, it's all these pieces coming together of her like putting together this massive thing and then like watching them excel. And I think it's the coolest thing. Small piece in the overall puzzle, but she's a part of their team. She goes out on missions with them. And I've just thoroughly learned a lot about leadership through SEAL
That's
teams.
awesome. Cool. And what's one book you're looking forward to?
Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People, 7 Ways to Welcome Like Jesus. That's my next one.
Okay. Well, Sarah, this was great. I really enjoyed you being
Thanks for
here.
having me.
Well, I'm Nick Lindsay, and I want to thank you for listening with us. Special thanks to Sarah for sharing your experiences and your gift of hospitality with us. We hope that you've enjoyed today's podcast. Come back next week for Steve and Derek, as they're going to give us a behind-the-scenes look at what's going on at Saddleback on their show Inside Saddleback, which is always great. And thanks for joining us. Remember, leaders are readers. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Group Talk. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast through iTunes and get new episodes downloaded automatically. Also, if you enjoy this program, please take a few minutes to give us a positive rating on iTunes so that other small group point people can find us more easily. We encourage you to visit our website at smallgroupnetwork.com to access our library of free resources, connect to a huddle with other small group ministry leaders in your area, read our blog articles, or join us on our Facebook group. Don't forget to use the hashtag SGNet when engaging with your social media channels. Thank you for your support.
Hi, it's James Browning again.